Welcome back, Director Leonard. Did you have an issue there? You're still muted.
Yeah, I got kicked out. I just I was kicked out of the internet.
Oh, okay.
Let's
Seems
hope
like,
that doesn't happen too much.
sure. Are you on a wireless connection or a wired connection?
Wireless.
Okay. Do you have any way to plug into your internet connection?
Uh, no.
Okay.
Well, I mean, there probably is a way, but you don't want me messing around with it. Usually I'm downstairs and it's a lot easier, but there's people in the house and that's
Okay.
gonna be too noisy down there. So,
Okay.
but I
Well,
should be okay. I'm gonna open this up just to. I mean, I don't really even need to look at. I read the agenda. I've got my stuff on there, so I'm like pretty much ready to go.
Ms. Schuster, are you available for an audio and video check?
I am.
All right, there we go. All right. It is seeming still a little dark in your area. Do you have any overhead or lamp lighting that could be turned on?
Yes, I can take care of that. I'll have to get up and do that, but I can
Sure.
certainly do that.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hello, can you hear me?
Good evening, Director O'Halloran. Yep, can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, perfect. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing okay. Is the audio coming through okay on your end?
Sounds great.
Great. All right.
All right.
And you're where you're going to be for the meeting?
Yes.
Hello, Maria. How are you this evening?
I'm doing good, thank you. How are you?
Excellent, Maria. I'm doing well. Can hear you and see you. Thanks for getting signed on.
Thank you.
You can see the trophy my daughter made for my husband last Father's Day. World's best dad.
Very cool.
2 solo cups duct taped together and then painted gold. Just saw it out of the corner. Like, I wonder he uses this for his meetings during the day because they're still not back. He works at
Okay.
Rockwell. Because they have to wear masks in the building and he doesn't want to. So they're still working from home. So I wonder if like people can see that janky little trophy in the corner.
You know, I wouldn't have known that it was solo cups and duct tape if you hadn't told
Yeah.
me.
You know, it's about as DIY as I get. God bless crafters. They're just not me. I'm not one of them. Anyway, all right.
Mr. Chasen, whenever you're available for a audio video check, I'm here.
How does that look and sound, Ben?
Excellent, Matt. Glad to
All
see you on.
right. Very good.
Thanks for
All
joining.
right. We'll see you in there. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening.
Hello, Director Herndon. How are you doing this evening?
I'm well, and you?
I'm sorry, Director Herndon, I've got people talking to me here. Can hear you on this side. How are we coming through on your end?
I'm doing good.
All right, thank you very much. Are you going to be using a headset this evening? Oh, you're working on it? Okay, thank you. We'll check again once you've got the headset connected.
Okay. Too much.
We
Okay.
are now logging on to the radio station. One moment. We are on.
I call this meeting to order. Would the secretary please call the roll?
Director Carr,
Present.
Director Garcia,
Present.
Director Gokul Gandhi,
Present.
Director Herndon,
Present.
Director Leonard,
Present.
Director O'Halloran,
Here.
Director Simpson,
Present.
Director Taylor. I'm sorry, Vice President Taylor,
In attendance.
and President Peterson.
Present.
We have 9 present.
The chair will now ask the secretary to lead us in the recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance. Members, please mute your devices.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We acknowledge that Milwaukee lies on traditional Menominee, Potawatomi, and Ho-Chunk homeland along the southwest shores of Lake Michigan, part of North America's largest system of freshwater lakes. On this site, the Milwaukee, Menominee, and Connecticut rivers meet, and the people of Wisconsin's Menominee, Ojibwe, Ho-Chunk, Oneida, and Mohican sovereign nations remain present to this day. Before we begin tonight's meeting, we have a short announcement regarding interpretation services for the Spanish members of our audience, speaking members of our audience.
Thank you. Buenas tardes. Para las personas que desean escuchar la Junta Escolar en español, por favor de llamar al teléfono 312-626-6799 y marcar el número de código 608-130-5362. Una vez más, para escuchar la Junta Escolar en español, por favor de llamar al teléfono 312-626-6799 y marcar el número de código 608-130-5362. Gracias.
Gracias. Pursuant to Board Rule 1.06, this meeting is being conducted virtually. Board members may be participating from Central Services Building. In order to allow as much public participation as possible, this meeting is being broadcast on radio station WYMS 88.9 FM via live stream on the Milwaukee website, MPS website, and on MPS YouTube stream, the links to which may be found on the MPS website on the broadcast page. Before we move to our agenda, the chair will ask that we share in a moment of silence to commemorate the passing of the following members of the MPS community. Rydell Arts King, a student at Marshall High School. Carol Bailey, a former MPS teacher. Nadine Barthuli, a retired teacher from Hayes Bilingual and Riley Montessori. Lois Clementi, a former MPS employee. Jean Crawford, a retired teacher at Durfler School. Brenda Giles, an education assistant at Our Avenue School. Master Anthony Ellis, a student at Bradley Tech. Sharon Grant, a former manager of the Department of Student Services. Olga Jaquez, a retired teacher at Milwaukee Spanish Immersion School. Lynell Hughes, a retired teacher from Hopkins Lloyd School. Jose Portala, a student at Pulaski High School. Peter Leshin, a teacher at Marshall High School. Eliani Nais, a former MPS teacher. William Quinn, a retired teacher and coach from Madison High School. Mimi Soto, a former assistant principal at Hayes Bilingual School. And Margaretti Watts, a retired teacher from Carson Academy. Let's have a moment of silence. Thank you. We will now move on to the items of business on our agenda. As is customary, no public testimony is taken at board meetings. For our listening audience, if you wish to access this evening's agenda items and attachments online, you may do so by visiting esb.milwaukee.k12.wi.us. Now let's begin. Madam Secretary, what is our first item of business?
The first item on tonight's agenda would be the action on the minutes of the August 2021 special and regular meetings of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors.
Do any members of the board have corrections for the minutes of August 2021? There being no corrections, the minutes are approved as printed.
So noted.
Okay. Madam Secretary, are there any reports or communications from the superintendent?
Yes, Mr. President, we do have two communications from the superintendent. And the first communication is the monthly report of the superintendent of schools. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Would the superintendent please present the report?
Yes, good evening, President Peterson and members of the board. Keith Fosley, Superintendent of Schools. September was a busy and exciting month as we kicked off the start of the 2021-22 school year for those students on the traditional start calendar. During my visits to schools throughout the district, I have seen firsthand our students' excitement for being back in the classroom and their desire to learn. It is heartwarming to see such strong community building in our schools, as well as teaching and learning. The 14th annual Run Back to School race also helped us to usher in the 2021-22 school year for students and their families, staff, and the community on a positive note. Thank you to the Recreation Department for once again making sure the event was a success due to the extensive planning. Speaking of the Milwaukee Recreation Department, congratulations are in order. Our Milwaukee Recreation Department is one of only 3 recreation departments in Wisconsin to have achieved accreditation through the Commission for Accreditation of Parks and Recognition Agency and the National Recreation and Parks Association. This distinguished accomplishment was awarded on September 23rd of 2021 during the National Recreation and Parks Association Conference. At this time, we are prepared to provide updates on transportation services and vaccinations for the 2021-22 school year. We will begin with an update on transportation services by David Solifaferi. David?
Good evening, members of the committee. David Solik-Pfeiffer, Director of Business and Transportation Services for Milwaukee Public Schools. I'd be glad, of course, to answer any questions at the conclusion of this, but I just want to give a brief overview of kind of where we are now relative to the last time we met in August. And I guess I'll start with, as always, with good news. And the good news is that we are seeing some really good movement in our operational capacity. And so what that means for us is we started, I think the last time we reported out, we were about 80 buses short on average on any given day. We have now moved that number down to about 50 buses. So it's almost half. With that, the number of no drivers has moved down to 40 buses. And so while we have really cut the shortage in half, we do experience a bit of an uptick in driver call-ins. And so that's not long-term absences. That would be people who are out for 2 to 3 days because of perhaps contact tracing, COVID, things of that nature. And that has just slowly started to uptick as the year has gone on. But again, from a daily shortage issue in just, I would say, just under a month, we've cut our regular issue in half. Obviously, the goal is to get down to 0, but that's a lot of work that we've been doing in the past 3 weeks. How did we achieve that strategy? I mean, if you were to look at the labor pool, it has remained relatively flat. And so it takes about 8 weeks to get out of training, and we're not seeing a really huge uptick in existing drivers. So those would be the folks that might go through the training in 3 to 4 weeks. So there are significant applicants, And then once you get from the application stage to actual behind the wheel, it could take up to 8 weeks. And so on average, we're seeing about 6 to 10 new drivers per 100 buses. And then that does not account for anybody that may have left the market for one reason or another. And so I would say, using a 600 bus model, we probably are experiencing between 15 to 20 net gains in the drivers. And so that is good news. It's not the movement that we'd like to see, but it's still obviously early in the application process for new applicants relative to August. Most of our gains have been with efficiencies in the model for us. And so one of the strategies has been to identify from a rider audit which students actually use the bus. And so we did a three-prong test in that regard. The first was identifying through the phone, text, email to families direct whether or not they were utilizing services. And out of that response, and I know that was one of the questions we had, a total of 3,340 families out of the I'd say about 33,000 messages that were delivered that indicated, in fact, that they did not use the services. So, of course, we removed those families from the bus rolls. Out of those responses, we got approximately 8,000 yeses. And so even though we are sending messages to about 33,000, we're typically not getting the response mechanism from the automated robocalls out to get a large quantity of responses. So of course, that leads us down the second path, which is to facilitate through schools. Part of the model that we wanted to make sure is that we know that teachers and school offices probably have a good idea of who rides the bus. And we asked them to indicate, we've got reports that they can access through our transportation system that would let us know which families are in the bus line and which families are in the parent transport line. And typically teachers know because they don't want to put students on a bus if their parents are going to be at the school to pick them up. That has been slowly trickling in. It's not as efficient as a robocall goes out. And so as we continue to receive those, what we call parent transports, we take them off of our bus roll. And finally, the last prong of the testing would be facilitating through drivers. Drivers obviously have to do a rider audit, and it's an inverse relationship. They only check the kids that are on the bus. And so what we do is we take the total number of kids that are assigned and then benchmark that against the riders that they have, the students that they've checked on the bus. And then the difference is what we would assume are parent transports. There's a bit of a challenge with that because you really want trending, because families aren't necessarily going to show up every single day on the bus, especially if there's timing challenges. So we want to see that load count over a 2 to 3 week period. And if it's 30 kids assigned and 20 kids regularly boarding, then we know that we have an ability to do consolidations. We started using that data to basically consolidate routes where we know the load is lower than what we expected. And just to back up a little bit, we are in a system of auto routing, and then we go from there. So we don't ask people if they use the bus, we assume they use the bus, and then we unassign based on responses to the contrary. It's just very difficult to have a model where you have to register and sign up for services, especially when for decades we've done the opposite, because you got to make sure you have enough capacity and then scale back, as opposed to you don't get enough responses, then you may not have enough buses, and then you got to build capacity. So just a little background there. So in the month of September, we have canceled 600 routes. That's a lot of bus routes. And so obviously in a 3-tier system, that's about 200 buses worth of services. And if you were to, kind of take that in the aggregate, you assume in a normal school year, pre-COVID, we were about 850 buses. Post-COVID, we were down to 750 buses. And then that kind of fluctuates a little bit to make sure that you've got adequate social distancing. And now we've moved essentially 200 buses worth of services out of our fleet. The good news with that is obviously it gets more kids serviced, and that puts that number down that we were alluding to from 80 buses from a driver shortage down to 40. Some of the externalities have to do with timing. I think we've talked about that. Then you may get a little bit tighter. So obviously then you may be showing up a few minutes late to the school because you've probably packed that bus route with a couple extra stops that you wouldn't otherwise have put into that model. So I will say, just again, in the aggregate, we are better today than any other day in the school system where we had all 160 schools running. And so that's the good news. And there is, I do feel like light at the end of the tunnel. And I feel as if we are in a position to really kind of turn the corner. What else have we done? In the interim, to kind of make sure that we're servicing families, there's been a question about county transit. Right now we have about 3,100 kids riding on the county transit system. That's double any other year that we've ever had. Obviously, that correlates with the greater than 7 mile threshold that we set as a board policy just pre-COVID. And we have been providing bus tickets, particularly at those secondary schools where service issues have persisted. And so we continue to do weekly deliveries to those schools. For the accommodation, a lot of that might just be a random Tuesday or a random Wednesday where there's maybe a driver that called in sick, but we want to obviously have an ability to get those families to and from school when those instances occur. We have quadrupled, I think I've said this before, we've quadrupled the use of our non-yellow bus fleet. So we're well over 100, I think we're up to like 130, 140 human service vehicles. That trend continues to go up, probably faster, almost double the speed of our yellow bus contractors because of the less hurdles that they need to go through in order to become a driver. You know, CDL requirement is it's significant time and barriers from start to finish. And so those contractors continue to probably give us about, I would say about 10 extra drivers a week almost, which is good, but you can only fit 4 kids per vehicle. So there's not a lot of bang for the buck. You know, for every 1 driver, you can get 40 kids. That would be 10 drivers in a human service vehicle. But it's significant nonetheless, and it does help us move the needle a little bit, particularly as we address some of the harder to fix situations. And finally, we did use, and we continue to use what we first coined out as a sweeper model, but it is more of a stranded service scenario. Originally, the idea was to get in a open tier. So if you got a 3-tier concept and a driver just happens to not have a second tier because there's nothing that fits in there, we would utilize that hour to do some routine pickups for known persistent issues until we address the issue. So that sweeper service we had put out there for about 23 drivers. 2 companies participated in that, and they continue to provide some level of support to really address in the short to midterm these persistent issues that we know have kept kids out of the building for extended periods of time. Of course, if it's just a 2 to 3 day issue or 1 to 2 day issue because of a particular driver, we continue to every single day have stranded service. As soon as the bus is clear, we identify that family, get the phone number, tell the family to go back to the house, and then we pick them up at the house and provide them services into the building as needed, at no charge, obviously, to anybody. So those are the strategies we've been using, and it has really helped us move the needle a little bit into a place where I think people are, realizing some of the fruits of those strategies. If you were to ask me, I'd say within the next 10 to 14 days, we probably will see that number drop in half again. That's my honest assessment. So I do feel as if we will be turning the corner and getting to a place where we're at 95, 98, 99% of our routes running on any given day. So that's my honest assessment there. For a little bit of reference, out of about 115 routes that had a particular challenge, 18 of them were special ed. So we're looking at really like an 80-20%, 80% regular ed routes, 20% special ed. We're prioritizing those door-to-door students with IEPs, to make sure that we're compliant with state and federal statutes, or state statutes and federal regulations in that regard. And of course, trying to make sure that we modify those challenges as quickly as possible. I think I'll take a breath and see if there's any questions, and be glad to answer anything you may have.
Contracts.
Oh, one more item. Yes, we did, as part of the request, we did solicit advice from the city attorney as it pertains to parent contracts. And a couple things. We are authorized to contract with parents, and not every parent has to be offered a contract. We can decide if we're going to address it in a particular manner, regular ed versus special ed, problem routes versus everybody, time frame from a duration standpoint, if we want to do per month, per week, so that we can help those hard to address issues, help reimburse families for those hard to address issues. And of course, there is a dispute process if in fact compensation becomes an issue. Typically, we would take the average cost of the prior year's regular ed cost for the year, and then apply that framework for a distribution. But of course, there is a mechanism for dispute resolution with the Department of Public Instruction. So that is an avenue that we could choose to move forward if the board and the administration desires. I think there's some things that need to be flushed out. Do we retroactively talk about families in the past that have issues? Do we really narrowly tailor this to families that continue to have documented long-term issues? And then, of course, we can proceed as needed. Sorry.
Chair Peterson and members of the board, we have gotten that information from the city attorney's office, and we plan as administration to implement that process of contracts. We're ready for any questions that you may have for us in regards to transportation services and where we at.
I'll start with Director Carr and then Vice President Taylor.
Thank you. Superintendent, administration, David, I first want to say thank you for getting this information out. I truly appreciate you all. I know that I was applying a little pressure to get some answers as it relates to the transportation issues. I do want to take this opportunity to reiterate that this is not solely an MPS issue. It's not actually an MPS issue per se. This is a citywide, actually statewide issue, country. It's an issue across the country. And so a lot of companies are struggling to hire and retain quality staff or employees to fulfill these roles. And so I do want to thank you all for getting this information out, for staying on top of it. I have a couple questions. The first one is, was there an RFP put out for the sweeper service services, transportation services, or the service helper transportation services? How do we identify and solidify those relationships to receive the services?
Administration.
Director Carr, President Peterson, members of the committee, David Solik, Fife-Eric, Director of Business and Transportation Services. We pay for a bus. And so when we solicit services with contractors, we reserve the right to use 3 tiers on every bus. And so as we kind of process the changes throughout the month of August and September, particularly as we consolidate services that we know are not needed, it creates gaps. So we did not need to solicit another RFP because wherever there is a gap, we reserve the right to use that vehicle for additional services. We really didn't have a lot of time to solicit external RFPs anyways, and the reality of the environment that we're in is every contractor that is with us right now are really the contractors that are in the region that would be probably bidding on services anyways. So no, we did not issue an RFP, nor was there a need to, because again, we paid for that bus in a block, AM and PM.
Dr. Carr, a follow-up? Another question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. My other question is, how do you have a breakdown, or can you walk me through how transportation has impacted our overall enrollment and average daily attendance?
It's
Administration.
hard for me.
Sure. President Peterson and members of the board, we will make an attempt to do that because we have virtual schools. We have 2 virtual schools where children are virtually daily, and then we have this whole piece around in-person learning. And as far as numbers as around attendance in those 2, we would have to get that information to you. But we know the number of students that we have targeted, and we have prioritized specialized services to make sure all of our special needs students are in school on a daily basis. And we also prioritize to make sure that we got all of our students that were part of the district in school, either in person or virtually, so that all of our students we were basically 95% of our projection this year at Third Friday. We're still going through right now, making sure that those students are accountable, because if a child came to school prior to Third Friday and on Third Friday, they count. And if they came to on Third Friday, they count as well. But also if they came one day before Third Friday, and we making sure that they return one day after Third Friday, so that that child will count. So right now we do not have a 100% composite of the total overall attendance, and we will have that by the close of business tomorrow, actually at 12 o'clock p.m. We will have that a.m. We will have that, and we will be able to give that number out early next week. So, and usually at our schools, we could probably give you the breakdown day by day attendance at each one of our schools. And when looking at the attendance piece, it's anomalies there, because we have schools where there's 100% basically walkers. Then we have schools where there's a large population of transportation into the school. And we also have locations where large numbers of parents drop off. So therefore, that is something that we would have to get back to you, the exact numbers, because I would be given a guesstimation on it if I did it tonight.
Thank you. Dr. Taylor.
Thank you, Chair Peterson. Thank you, administration. I know last month we had information come to PACE in reference of, are you able to hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. In reference of updates for parents. So I just have 2 questions. One is, will we begin to update monthly until we kind of get this under control, so that parents and community members as well can get the information on where we at? I was glad to see that we are half down in the number of buses and bus drivers, but also know that this is kind of a continuing problem. And the second one is, what exactly is the process? I was also happy to see if a parent calls, the child goes back home and gets picked up by the service. Is that for every child or every parent that calls the bus that day, or how do we process that? So those are my 2 questions.
Okay, administration.
Director Taylor, members of the committee, David Solik, Fife-Ferrick, Director of Business and Transportation Services. So if I don't answer the question, obviously, please let me know. I had a little bit of a hard time hearing the totality of the question. It sounded like the first piece was in relationship to a monthly update. And I'd be glad to give an update. I don't speak for the rest of the team here, but I'd be glad to give an update as often as necessary. No problem there whatsoever. The second question on, I believe, was in relationship to stranded service. If a family didn't get picked up, what was the protocol? So, and I'll back up a little bit. We've tried to tighten up our process to make sure that communication is as clear and concise each and every day as possible. So we've done some tweaks, some process improvements in that regard. And so each day by 6:45 is the goal. That should be the first, right around the first stop on each route. We're communicating to everybody that has a reported issue that you have a problem, right? That your bus may or may not be, that your bus will not be coming, or if it is, it's going to be late, and then we'll send a follow-up message. At that point, the message says, you probably should try to get your kid to school if at all possible. And then what we do is we have a process whereby if a family reaches out either to the company, because a lot of times they'll call to the company directly first, or if they call to our office, we document it. So we basically call in a request for services, and we get the phone number of the family. And at that point, as soon as a bus is available, we have that particular company call. And we really want it to be the same company that has the service-related issue. I don't want to be passing the problem on to another contractor. So we delineate those services really relative to whatever company is having the problem on the given day, and to say, as soon as Wisconsin Central or Lakeside or whoever it is, as soon as you have a bus clear, here's the phone number. We want you to go and actually call the family at that address, so that once you're a couple blocks away, that's when the student comes out and they get picked up and they get brought into the building. I think the bigger challenge with that is, that bus may not be free until about 9:30 in some instances. And if at all possible, obviously the goal is to, if it's a 7:20 school, to have that family bring them in on that particular day so that they don't miss 2 hours of instruction. And so that's where our messaging is: bring them to the school if you can, and if you have a problem, contact your child's bus company so that they can arrange a special pickup. If for some reason that family called over to the school, or if they called to us, we will orchestrate that pickup as well on behalf of the family. So it is kind of like a three-prong approach. Again, it depends on if the family is used to calling the company every day, and we want to encourage that, because then they can dispatch that driver. Because a lot of times what will happen is they'll report at 6 o'clock that they have a problem. Then the bus driver comes strolling in at 6:25, 6:30. So then they give an update to that, in which case then they say, okay, now we've got you covered. We're going to get you picked up. And so as much as possible, because it's a fluid process, we want to connect the family member with the bus company direct, so that they can get that picked up, that student picked up as quickly as possible, or they can amend the process so that they don't have a 3-hour delay in attendance.
Thank you very much. Follow-up, Director Taylor? Okay, I see. I have Director Simpson, then O'Halloran, then Gokul-Gandhi, and then Leonard, and then myself, perhaps, and Director Garcia, whoever speaks first. Okay, it's now Director Simpson.
Thank you. So Director or Vice Chair Taylor kind of asked the question I was thinking with this, the stranded services. Do we have a sense of our capacity to pick up children who are stranded? I'm hearing so many families say, we had one day of bus service. I had one family actually say this entire school year. So do we have a sense of our capacity to handle kids who are stranded both at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day? Or is that just very fluid day to day?
Director Simpson, members of the committee, David Solik, Director of Business Transportation. I'll be honest, it is a very, very fluid process. And the challenge is we have 600 buses on the road. So absolutely, could we pick up every student? If we could orchestrate a communication protocol? Yes. I think the challenge is between 7 and 10, families are either deciding to take them or they're not. And the biggest problem is people say, well, if what buses aren't running, why don't you orchestrate a 9:30 pickup as soon as the bus is free to go get them? Well, we would just be driving into oblivion because we have to make sure that we actually contact the family and that they are still waiting at the house. And that is a significant challenge. And so with at the time 80 buses and now we're down 50 down to 40, we kind of work in inverse. And we say, please, today, I'm sorry, there's a problem, and we'll notify you again tomorrow, get your child to school. And if you can't, reach out to us and we will orchestrate a pickup, because that might translate to, out of 10 kids needing a pickup, 2 of them left without a means. And that's a much more manageable process because, of course, we have people calling to let the family know, okay, we're going to this house, as opposed to trying to orchestrate 10 calls, and I'm just using 10 out of 10 for everybody that misses the bus. And so the flip side of that as well is that on any given day, what typically will happen at a contractor's terminal is if they're short a couple extra drivers, the first couple people to leave to actually be standbys might be dispatchers, and they might be people who would otherwise work in the office because they also have their CDL. And then that creates a little bit of a bottleneck from a communication protocol, which is, again, why we try to do robocalls to the best of our ability. So we have the capacity. I think the challenge is if we know that a family can get there at 7:30 as opposed to 9:30, that is preferred, because then the inverse is going to happen in the PM. They're going to wait until 5 o'clock to get a bus at the end of the day. And then that just creates a whole nother strain on the system for teachers and principals at the school who have to sit with those families. I hope that makes sense.
Yes, no, thank you. That's exactly what I was looking for. Yes, I mean, thank you for working on this. I know this is just a monumental problem. And as Director Carr said, just nationally, this isn't specific to MPS. So thank you for working on a very difficult situation. And, I know you hear it, but, our families are just desperate. It's just having a huge impact on their life every single day. So I just appreciate the work that you're doing to do whatever we can to resolve some of this as quickly as possible. Thanks.
Thank you. Director O'Halloran.
I'm gonna pass.
Thank you. Director Gokul Gandhi.
I just have a question. Are there any particular routes still that are being impacted on a day-to-day basis? I know that I've heard from a couple of parents over and over that their routes are specifically being impacted. So I just wanted to know if you had that information. Are we still, with the improvement that you've noted, are those routes still being impacted, or is there still that persistent problem?
Administration. Members of the committee, Dave Solik, Fife-Eric, Director of Business Transportation. So with the kind of the way that we've addressed the problem, kind of parsed it off in our office, there are, if you were to look at a map, the people that are furthest away from the school are going to be the hardest to address. Obviously, just thinking that one through, the closest families to a school have the most options because all of the bus routes have to get to the school. So if you're a south side bus route going to Elm, then you're going to pass downtown and you're going to catch some of the folks that could otherwise be on a bus route that has a problem. And so typically what our strategy is the maximum number of kids that we can move right away, we're going to move. So in this instance, a lot of times it's the closest kids to the school because they have the most alternate options. There's all these other bus routes that are coming past. So there are, to answer your question, there are some routes that continue to be more persistent issues, because if I am way down on the southwest side of town and I'm going to a far northeast side school, there's not a whole lot of bus routes that I can replace you with. And so unfortunately, those are the ones that we try to target as soon as the driver becomes available, because those are the ones that don't have alternate options. And so we have this two-pronged test where as soon as you get a driver clear, okay, they're going to this one because I got nobody else to do this. All of these routes, we're going to go ahead and move students to other routes, which it's kind of a domino effect. Is this one might have 30 and this one might have 20, and I'm getting into the weeds a little bit here, but in order to move these kids to this one, I might need to move these kids to this one because I need to maintain a distribution that doesn't have, we're still trying to maintain social distancing. And so it is a really delicate ecosystem. And so, the hardest part of all of this is making sure that everybody understands what we're doing, because we're communicating to schools and says, okay, this route 10 is having a problem. We're going to move these 20 kids to route 20, but in order to get the kids on route 20, we need to move half the kids from route 20 to route 30. And then people don't understand because they'll say, well, route 20 doesn't have a problem. Yeah, but in order to move kids from 10 to 20, I got to move kids from 20 to 30. And that's where it's that good communication, because it's not only the families that need to know, it's the teachers on the back end of the process that need to make sure they put them on the right bus, because we're moving all of these parts. And so that's where, again, I know the sense of urgency is there, but we just, in the process, we're not dealing with boxes, right? We just gotta make sure that we're being really cautious with how we're handling people's kids and making sure that we don't all of a sudden change the time from 7:15 to 6:15 and families are like, oh my gosh. And so there is like lots of factors that I think people don't quite understand, because we're trying to move as quickly as possible, but also trying to be considerate in how we process our changes. And so yes, the answer to your question, there's some persistent issues that continue to be harder to solve, and those might be the targets that we go after if we're going to explore or implement the parent contract.
Yeah, and I think you alluded to my next question. I have a separate question, President Peterson.
Go ahead.
So are you, as we see an increase rising of cases and schools being shut down, are you worried about our contracts or the availability of buses, or are you okay with what we have in place now and you're not worried we're going to lose the buses that we have?
Administration.
Director Gokul Gandhi, members of the committee, David Solik, Fife-Eric, Director of Business and Transportation Services. Well, I'm going to be delicate in answering this question. The longer we're off, the more likely drivers will go elsewhere. And so we've seen that happen. So obviously, if you were to ask any contractor, they would say, stay open, right? That's the operational answer. That being said, we're not dealing with boxes. So I would say we will be okay as long as we don't have an extended shutdown again. And if there is, then we would anticipate some of that attrition that we are experiencing right now.
Thank you.
Okay, Director Leonard.
Sorry about that. Mr. Solfair, thank you very much. You've been, first of all, I want to thank you just because you've been very with me. You've always given me information that's been very easy for me to
Breaking up some, Director Leonard.
talk to, administrators and parents very quickly on what's going on with the situation, and they've been very receptive to it. I have just one question. This may be a little too fluid. Give me a great answer yet, but on the opposite side of it, how many routes are displaying consistency? Out of 600 routes, how many would you say you feel really safe about, that that they're always going to be there and following through on picking up most students on every day?
Administration.
Director Leonard, members of the committee, David Solik, Fife-Eric, Director of Business and Transportation Services. I missed some of I think I got the gist of it, but you did break up quite a bit. As I had stated in last month's, I know we look at problems, but we're hovering above 90% of regular driver attendance. Coverage. We do have attendance issues that double and triple what we've had in past years, and I think I alluded to that as well, where in a typical contract year, we assume 10% of the staff is going to be absent for one reason or another. And so they have standbys that cover that 10%. Of course, on bad days, and it could be any number of reasons for a bad day, we're at 30% attendance issues. But that is a lot of times a one-off. And if you looked at a chart, you'd see, okay, we're at 30 and now we're at 20%. And now we're back up to 30. And so we're hovering between 90 and 95% of all of our routes are running. And again, I want to be clear, we got 600 buses, but we got 2,400 bus routes. I mean, we got actually a little bit over 600 buses because we got a 3-tier system. So when you look at the aggregate, if I'm talking about, let's just say 140 bus routes worth of problems, that means 2,200 bus routes worth of no problems, right? And I mean, or not the same kind of problem. I mean, we've talked about how we kind of condense these routes to make them tighter. So there are a little bit of delays that are unavoidable with, packaging things up in ways that you wouldn't otherwise package them. But these are regular drivers that are coming to work, that are servicing families, going to the same corner, morning and the afternoon. And again, the goal is obviously 100%, but we are hovering between 90 and 95% of actual driver coverage on any given package.
Follow-up, Director Leonard?
No, we're good. We're good.
Director Garcia?
My question has been asked already, so thank you.
Thank you. Director Taylor, could you take the gavel while I make a statement about this?
Gavel has been passed.
So noted.
Thank you. I just want to mention one other effort that was attempted by the administration and myself is after Massachusetts Governor Charles Baker activated the members of the Massachusetts National Guard on September 13th, we contacted the governor, asking him to consider that. We also talked to the mayor, and the mayor also contacted the governor, suggesting that that would be a good consideration. We continued to ask and try to figure out what was going to be happening. And ultimately, the Wisconsin Legislative Council, which is the speaks for itself. It deals with all sorts of legislative and legal issues. Issued a statement, and I'll just briefly just want to explain it. There's various reasons the National Guard can be called up: rebellion, riot, invasion, terrorism, or huge disaster, floods, fires, tornadoes. And then the one that would be most applicable to our condition would be if the governor declares a state of emergency relating to public health under the statutes. And again, that's really the only reason he would be able to implement calling out the National Guard to help with the bus drivers crisis. He would have to declare a state of emergency relating to public health, and no state of emergency related to public health currently is in effect, because why? The Wisconsin Supreme Court decision, Everett versus Evers, basically says he can't issue those kind of public health dictates. And so their thinking is that he lacks the authority to declare a new state of emergency, and thus will not be sending us the National Guard. I think I raise this just so people know that we've been turning over every rock or stone that we can to try to solve this problem. And larger political clouds that affect much of our state also affects this issue. Because with the Supreme Court deciding that the governor can't take that kind of action or any kind of action in terms of public health mandates, is really the root cause of it. Just wanted to inform the public of our attempts. Hopefully next time we'll be more successful. So I can take the gavel back, Vice President Taylor. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions? I know everybody had a chance going through once. Anybody else? Okay, I see Director Carr again. Please go ahead.
One last question. What's the timeline? And I apologize if it were already mentioned. What's the timeline for implementing the parent contracts, parent transportation contracts?
Administration.
Chair, President Peterson and members of the board, we just received the information and we shared that with you tonight. And our goal is to now do some number crunching and finding out in some of those situations which individual parents that we want to work with to extend contracts with. and we're looking at starting that process. So I'm thinking probably early October to make sure that that process is in place and moving. And it may be faster with families that that have already taken on that responsibility of doing just that. And so there's just some process that we have to work through. We have only done this with, I think, private schools. And so therefore, there's some work that we need to do to make sure we work out the cost, and whether, and David talked about whether we're going to do it monthly or biweekly or whatever the situation may be. Those kinds of things are in the process right now being worked out.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Dr. Carr?
Yes, yes. Thank you for that information. I would just ask, when you all receive the information, if you could send it to us board members as soon as possible, just so we can keep our constituents, parents, everyone in the community abreast of what's happening and the progress that has been made. Because one of the things I've observed, when people don't hear from us, it almost appears as if we're not doing anything when things are happening behind the scenes. And so I just want to keep that open line of communication and transparency with our families, our children, and community members. And the other thing I will say, my primary concern is the loss of instructional time. And so I appreciate the urgency, and I encourage the urgency to continue because while we're scrambling, trying to figure out a solution to these broader issues, children are still losing critical instructional time, and that's very important. So thank you all again for your work on this. I appreciate each and every one of you.
Thank you. Superintendent, do you wish to continue your monthly report?
Yes. First of all, I'd like to say that President Peterson, members of the board, we will make sure that we keep the board informed, and also with students with IEPs, as we are making sure that compensatory services are provided. If there's a delay with the bus, it's automatic. That is something that Jennifer Mims-Howell and her team has been on top of, and making sure that we meet the needs of all of our families. With that said, I want to turn you over to Adrian Matalini to walk through what you've done around the vaccinations. Adrian.
Thank you, President Peterson, members of the board, Adrian Matalini, Chief Human Resources Officer. This evening, I'm going to provide a brief update on the vaccine mandate implementation. First of all, I would like to take a moment to thank the staff in Human Resources, Technology, and Communications for all the hard work they have done the past 3 weeks to move implementation forward on this very important initiative. I would like to mention that this week we partnered with the Milwaukee Health Department to host 2 vaccination clinics here at the central office building. One was Tuesday and one was today. So we're very excited that we were able to offer that to our employees. Starting tomorrow, October 1st, employees will be able to go into employee self-service and upload their proof of vaccination, as well as submit accommodation requests. At this time, I would like to do a very quick demo of what this process will look like. So if you would bear with me. Employees will be able to access employee self-service through the homepage, as you can see here. They could click on the staff button at the top on the blue ribbon. You click on there, and then you see the self-service button right there. You just need to click there, and they will get into the login page, which looks like this. I'm just going to log in here. If you give me a moment. Okay, we're done. Please know that this is a dummy account. It's not a real employee with any real information. As you can see here, when they get to the employee self-service page, there will be a COVID vaccine status tile right here. All an employee will have to do is click on that button, and then they'll see their information, their name, ID number, and this is for a school year. And then there'll be a series of questions for them to answer. The first question is, I am fully vaccinated against COVID-19. If someone is fully vaccinated and has their card or some documentation showing that proof, they simply click on the button, click on the no, and then it goes to yes. So they're answering yes, and then they will be asked at the bottom here to provide some information about the vaccine. They could choose and tell if it was the Johnson & Johnson, the Moderna, or the Pfizer. Then they'll ask them to provide a date of the first dose. They'll say it was and then the second dose, put that there. And then they'll have to click on a box, I agree. They're certifying that the information is accurate and true, and they acknowledge that the information is subject to verification, and that intentionally providing incorrect information may result in disciplinary action. And so you'll click the button, and then we just ask them to type your name. And then at that point, you could click the button here to upload vaccine documentation. I'll get to that later. I want to go back. So if someone has an accommodation, they will answer one of the two questions below. I have a religious accommodation for the COVID-19 vaccine, or I have a medical accommodation from the COVID-19 vaccine. So they'll click the no button to turn it yes. And then they'll have to certify the same statement as before, saying they agree that this information is accurate and true. And they'll provide their name. And then they click the upload accommodation doc, and that's where they would upload the accommodation form that they have, whether it's religious or accommodation. So now going back to showing the uploading of the vaccine proof, you click, as I said, yes, you put on the dates of the doses. And then you click the vaccine, upload vaccine documentation. And a button will pop here that says My Device. So if you're on a computer, it can go to your hard drive. You can select from what's on your computer. But if you can access it from a mobile device in the same manner as you do on a computer, when you go to the MPS website, when you click My Device, if you're on a phone, you'll be able to select from the photos on your phone. So it's very easy for an individual that can just take a picture on their phone of their card, and they'll be able to easily upload it. Otherwise, like here, if you scan and save something, you go to pictures, like I saved vaccine demo, you would upload it. And when it says upload's complete, you click done. And it says, thank you, your vaccine status document was uploaded successfully. You click OK, and you could scroll down, and then you'll be able to see on the document, under documentation, that the attachment is there. You have an opportunity to view it to make sure, okay, what did I upload? And then you'll see at the bottom that it's pending. So they know that it's currently at that point has moved into the workflow and human resources, where some individual on the team will review the documentation and will either approve it or deny it. And if it's approved or denied, an email goes directly to the employee, informing them that yes, it's been approved, or if it's been denied, what the reason is. It might be pictures too blurry or whatever it may be. So that is the process in a nutshell. So we're excited to roll it out tomorrow, and hopefully we will be able to get these documentations in and on a regular basis and steadily come in through November 1st. Also want to mention that the instructions on how to upload the proof of vaccination and accommodation requests have been drafted and will be published on our website, along with the accommodation forms. Frequently asked questions have been developed and will be published on the website as well. The FAQs will be updated periodically as needed. We know questions will come up, something we may have not thought of yet. As soon as that happens, we'll definitely update that page so that everyone will be aware of that question and what the answer would be. Since the employee self-service module will not be live until tomorrow, accommodation requests have not been submitted or reviewed yet. However, 21 employees have reached out to Employment Relations and inquired about the accommodation request process. So we have that information, and we have provided some details for them and tell them what to look out for so they can submit the information that is needed. In our review of September resignations, no employee has cited the vaccine mandate as a reason for their resignation. Currently, for the month of September, we have received a total of 89 resignations and retirements across all employee groups. In September of 2018, we had 96 resignations and retirements. In September of 2019, we had 78 resignations and retirements. And in September 2020, we had 86 resignations and retirements. That concludes my update, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Very good. Raise your hand if you wish, or Director O'Halloran.
Thank you so much. I want to commend the staff for putting this together so quickly. I know every day feels really long these days. So in some respects, it feels like we made this decision a while ago, and yet that was not that long ago. So thank you for walking us through it. It looks like a really great process, and it seems to be pretty intuitive. So I'm hopeful that everybody can make sense of it. I did. So this kind of speaks to the mandate side. Have we also been, I don't know what the process is going to look like for students then. The mandate side is one piece that I'm sure we have a more sense of an urgency around it, but have we started figuring out the process for the student incentive side?
Thank you. Administration?
President Peterson, members of the board, we're doing the processes side by side. We're in the process right now of merging the systems together. We're making sure that the data compares. There's a whole piece that we are going to be working on that is going to be forward coming to you, because we also have to provide a third-party contract to help us with this process. So that means we're going to bring that all back to you at a board meeting very soon to kind of walk you through the same thing we demoed here. And the reason why we didn't demo that one tonight is because we want to make sure that we have that third-party vendor on board, and we're going to do it all at that same time is our goal. But we're doing we follow the same process to make it happen for students the same way.
Thank you. Follow-up, Director Hernan? O'Halloran?
I don't really have any other questions. I would just put a plug in that I think a lot of people may be eligible for booster shots. And so if you've already gotten your 2, I just wanted to put it out there that you may want to speak with your provider to see if you are eligible for the booster shot in order to add that extra layer of protection. So thank you.
Thank you. Director Simpson. And then I have Director Herndon, and then Garcia and Carr.
Thank you, President Peterson. I was just wondering about our ability to handle all of this with our current HR staff. Seems to me that this is going to be a lot of information coming at us in a relatively short amount of time, and just wondering, what our plan is for handling that kind of influx.
Administration.
President Peterson, Director Simpson, members of the board, Ajay Malani, Chief of Human Resources. Yes, staffing is definitely the top of my priority when it comes to implementing this mandate. We have, at this point, hired a few temps from HR that they're starting tomorrow. And so we'll have them in to help with the review process of the forms and requests that come in. We are still working on getting a temp for the occupational health nurse, but we're definitely hopeful that we'll get one soon. And if not, we will at next board meeting bring a job description for the occupational health nurse for you guys to approve, so that we can look at hiring someone permanently. Also tonight, if all goes well, you'll be approving the hire of an analyst in an employment relations. And so if that person is approved, then they will be starting in a couple weeks. And so there'll be a set of hands that can really help us. And we will continue to monitor and provide as much support as we can to the teams in HR. And we need to get more staff. We will definitely do what we need to do to process these as quickly as possible.
Thank you.
I had a little follow-up just related to the student side of this, and do we have a plan for, sort of like, who's going to be looking at all of that information? Is that at the school level, or is that going somewhere else also?
Administration.
the survey?
President Peterson and members of the board, yes, we are going to be working with HR, but the idea that we're going to be working with the state registry, there's trying to make sure that just like we do all other vaccinations, so that part is going to be we're going to try to link up there to make sure which is a little more smoother.
Great, thank you.
Director Herndon now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Part of my questioning was answered. So I have one last one, and that's in terms of the process of the students uploading their vaccination card. Many don't have the technical capabilities in their home, more than likely. So will the schools be accommodating the students in that respect?
Administration.
President Peterson and members of the board, yes. And one of the things that we're going to do, we're starting off making sure that they have the correct address that's on file. And that's one of the things that we're going to be now pushing it back to the school level to make sure that principals and staff at the school knows students and making sure that those things are taken care of there. Then we talked about this whole thing of making sure we got the correct information first and then working with a third-party vendor to get the card out to the student and the family. And through Infinite Campus. So it's going to be loaded in Infinite Campus. The same kind of way that the staff is loaded. So we got a directory where we can go find everything.
Okay.
Director Garcia.
Yeah, so my question is in regards to folks who do get the, what is that, the
Accommodation.
Accommodation, thank you. The accommodation, I know that we are also requesting that they have COVID testing. So can you just specify how that fits into the process as far as verification of that? Like, where's that information housed? Who's leading that process?
Administration.
President Peterson, Director Garcia, members of the board, Adrian Maleni, Chief Human Resources Officer. Once we go through the initial process of identifying all of the individuals that have an approved accommodation, we'll be working with our current vendor that we have with the DHS program. We have gotten approval from DHS that we can do the weekly testing under that program, and so they will cover the costs. Our vendor has indicated, and we're working with setting up a process where we'll identify through our system. That's what's so nice about using employee self-service. We'll be able to identify who are all the individuals that have an approved accommodation, what school location they're at. And so then we'll be able to run a report, and we could share with the vendor at each school, because they have a lab technician at each school. So we can share them. Here's a list, and they can have like a little checklist of here are 5 individuals that will need to be tested every Tuesday and Friday. And so at that point, the technician will have that list. And at the end of the day, they will send that back to Summit and also share it with the principal of these individuals. They were tested, or there may be 1 or 2 that didn't. It may be because they were absent that day. So then that information will then get relayed to Human Resources. And at that point, we'll have that information and verify with our list of all individuals who did not test that day or that week.
Thank you. Any follow-up? Director Carr.
Thank you. So I want to go on the record and saying this was probably one of the greatest struggles I've experienced in this role thus far, voting to make the vaccination mandatory simply because I believe in my body, my choice. However, I understand the necessity for the districts to have this mandate in place to reduce risk and liability, but I'm still struggling. And so one of the things I want to say, if anyone can even provide an answer for this at this point, but we mandate vaccinations for the faculty and staff, partners, everyone else, and we incentivize it for our young people, our students. And so we're essentially protecting the side of, or one aspect of what makes up the district, but not the other aspect. So I guess what I'm getting at is if a student contracts the virus and is in school, and say 3% of that student body population within that school contracts the virus, the school still has to shut down. And so I'm wondering how or what are the plans for addressing that? I see that we have, was it 2 additional schools this week that have shut down? And part of mandating the vaccination, part of that decision was to kind of prevent or reduce school closures. Yet if our children have it, that's not going to reduce or prevent that. And so is there any talks or plans for addressing the other aspect of the vaccination mandate, specifically with students, to again prevent or reduce school closures?
Administration.
President Peterson and members of the board, Director Carr, thank you for your question. And I just want to share that what we are doing is trying to carry out the board's adopted item, right? And also we're looking at this whole thing around when we talk about a school closure, it is a combination of students and staff. Anyone that in those buildings we count and total together to get to the 3% for a school closure. But as far as students, if there is, and one of the things with students, we're just now from to 12 years old and up that can get the vaccination. And also when you take a look at, there's some study out now, we all know that hopefully that they will start as early as 5 years old going forward. And there are states that have said vaccinate the children. But those are the kind of things that we're all looking at and seeing what can be done, but there is no direction as of now on that, and there is no history on that right now. So looking at all those things, and I'll be the first to say, we want to do everything that we possibly can to, number one, make sure that everyone is safe and healthy. That's first and paramount. But the second thing also to do everything that we can to keep our doors open and making sure that children have an opportunity to face-to-face learning. And I think by using all the mitigating strategies that we have with masks and social distancing, washing hands, and all of those kinds of things, I think it mitigates the risk. And when you take a look at 158 schools, and to only have 3 schools out of 158 schools that may be in that protocol, and that's only for 10 days, and they come right back, and that's also counting weekend days. And I just think that we are truly making progress, but we are also taking safety precautionary measures to make sure that everyone is safe all at the same time.
Thank you. And I'll just add one little thing, which is I try to stay away from saying school closures. I know a lot of us do that, and because it seems that way, but in fact, what we're doing is we're shifting instruction to be virtual. I mean, in that sense, it's not like school is closed and kids are not expected to be in attendance and teachers are not expected to be teaching. And I know it's a small thing, but having spoken with the press regularly this last week, I think I've trained my tongue to talk about shifting instruction instead of closing schools. Just a suggestion. Any other comments or questions about this matter? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, what's the next item of business?
The next item on tonight's agenda is the second communication from the Superintendent of Schools, which is action on a request to amend the non-instrumentality charter school contract with Milwaukee Excellence, Inc. for the Milwaukee Excellence Charter School. The recommendation is that the board approve the amendment to the non-instrumentality charter school contract, as well as the revised lease agreement that are both attached to this item.
Would the superintendent please present this item?
President Peterson and members of the board, due to the change in leadership at Milwaukee Excellence Charter School, we're asking for your approval to amend the school contract and revise the lease agreement as attached in the item. We are prepared to answer any questions that you may have regarding this item. Thank you, and thanks to the Office of Board Governance for their assistance in getting this item posted on the agenda in a timely manner. Thank you.
Does the board wish to have it make any comments? Director Herndon, did I see your hand? Yes.
Yes, I have two questions. The first question is in relation to the leased space. And in the written documentation or the written portion of the contract, it indicates that the school would occupy the entirety of the third floor. On the other hand, the drawing does not stipulate the whole floor, and the original contract did not either. There are, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 rooms that are not occupied by the school in the original lease agreement, and the drawing in this case, Exhibit A, does not indicate that either. So I'd like clarification on that, and then we can go to the next question.
Thank you. Administration.
President Peterson, Director Herndon, members of the board, Sean Kane, Interim Director, Facilities and Maintenance Services. As far as with the lease agreement that we have in front of us, the only thing that changed is the name of the person that's identified for Milwaukee Excellence. They are occupying the third floor. The vast majority of the floor that's indicated in the Bushade third floor plan, there's about 7 spaces that they're not utilizing, and those are being keyed off that the leasee is not occupying, but they are on the third floor, but not the entire floor.
Follow up, Director Herndon.
Yes, well, I just expected the contract to be more explicit. Entirety means the whole floor, and that's what caught my eyes. Is wait a minute, we discussed what you just said, which was the locks on some of the doors, 6 or 7 rooms, and that's what the drawing says too. I just think that it should be clarified. The second question is on the extension of the lease as being intentionally omitted. Is there an explanation what that means in this case?
Thank you. Administration. President Peterson, Director Herndon, members of the board, Sean Kane, Interim Director for Facilities and Maintenance. This is the same language that we had on the previous lease agreement. Yes, the agreement that we have in place is that the arrangement was the term was supposed to be for 11 months to get Milwaukee Excellence to occupy that facility, and that the intent is to explore other options once the term expires.
Thank you. Director Herndon.
You're right. A follow up on that was there was also to be a report brought to the board in February that's not documented in this either, and it should have been, because if I'm not mistaken, that was part of the motion that was passed, because they are expected to be working on a facility of their own in the interim until the end of June, so that we don't have the complications that occurred this past July.
Mr. Chair?
Yes,
members of the board?
Yeah.
That language was a part of the motion with the original lease, so that language still stands. The board has already approved that language for the report to come back to the board.
Thank you. Any other questions by any other member? Okay, what's this does require action, does it not?
This is an action item.
Yes, so we need a motion to agree with the request to amend the non-instrumentality charter school contract. I see Director Carr has made the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Director O'Halloran. Any further discussion? No further discussion. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
On Director Carr's motion to approve a request to amend the non-instrumentality charter school contract with Milwaukee Excellence, Inc. for Milwaukee Excellence Charter School, for the contract and to update the lease as recommended and attached to this item. Seconded by Director O'Halloran. Director Carr.
Aye.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Vice President Taylor. She may have lost signal. I see her going in and out. Vice President Taylor. And President Peterson.
Aye.
That's 8 ayes, 1 temporarily absent. The motion passes.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, are there any reports or communications from the Office of Board Governance?
Yes, Mr. President, there is one communication, and that is the monthly legislative report. This is an informational item, and although it has been noticed for possible action, no action is required.
Would the board clerk please present the report?
Yes, Mr. President, we do have Mr. Thiel, who is on the platform to give the monthly report.
Thank you. Mr. Thiel.
Thank you, President Peterson, members of the board. Chris Thiel, Director of Governmental Relations. Just a quick update, and then happy to answer questions if there are any. At the state level, I've started all of these updates by reminding people that currently the state of Wisconsin has about $1.3 billion that are unallocated. At the end of the state budget process, the decision was made to not fund a number of concerns. And as we talk about policy opportunities from here until the end of the session, I think it's useful to remind people who may not, or tell people who may not know, that the state has over $1 billion with which we could fulfill some solutions that we've talked about. One of the highlights of the last month is that the state superintendent gave the annual State of Education speech, Dr. Jill Underly giving her speech this time around since she was first elected. And we're in a season perhaps where we're talking about policy, but we're also talking about politics. We've seen some bills introduced and moved forward that are more or less getting the governor and the legislature into a back and forth discussion. However, one of the items that we have been concerned about as a district, as a board, is the bill related to, but that does not use the term critical race theory. You may have seen reporting on this. The concerns are many, certainly. One of the pieces that has not necessarily been touched on, there's a fiscal penalty related to this bill. And so the fact that the members of the legislature who put the bill forward cannot define the terms that they do or do not want to see talked about in the legislation, and then they attach a 10% aid penalty to that legislation, means, as commentators have said, that people don't really know what they can or cannot talk about. On top of the fact that obviously we need to discuss some important factual information of our history. So for us, it would be roughly a $60 million penalty if this bill went all the way through. We are registered in opposition, and our hope is that if it moves forward, the governor does veto that. One of the other instances or things that I think is useful to talk about is we had a civics education bill that sped through the legislative process. Sometimes you hear about government being slow. And in this instance, Speaker Voss had a civics bill that was given barely 24-hour notice before going to committee, then went to executive session, then went to the floor of the assembly, then was passed. The state superintendent made reference about the fact that we're having a civics bill and we didn't give the public an opportunity to have the discussion, which I think is fair, because in terms of more of the political theater, unfortunately, that we're seeing, there was another bill on a very important issue, which is student mental health, where the authors basically demand that the governor use the federal money, or a portion of the federal money that he has authority over, to fund student mental health. They demand that he use $100 million of that. Again, going back to what we know, we have over $1.3 billion available at the state level. And as we've discussed here, and many people participated in, there are really solid bipartisan policies out there in the form of the Blue Ribbon Commission recommendations on K-12 education. Within those is a policy recommendation that the state create a categorical aid program of close to $50 million annually, so that's $100 million over the biennium, for student mental health. So given the speed with which we just saw the civics bill go through, and given the fact that we have that blue ribbon report available to be moved as well, and we have the money there from the state level, if we could find a way to agree to move this solution forward, we have the opportunity, we have the funding, and it would be fantastic for students if we were able to actually get there. On the federal level, we've discussed the fact that we've got a couple of pieces in motion. We've talked about the infrastructure bill. We've talked about the reconciliation bill. As I mentioned last time, the infrastructure bill that was passed by the Senate does not include infrastructure related to schools. The reconciliation bill that they're attempting to move forward with some struggle, but the normal legislative process is playing out, does include funding that at least we believe we're in negotiation, but that reconciliation bill would include any number of things that would be positive for our students: the early childhood education pieces, the assistance for teacher development, recruitment, retainment, just a host of policy items that for a long time we've known that students need. And our hope is that they can continue to move that forward and get it over the finish line. Sometimes people ask, what can they do to help? And I would repeat again that if people are so inclined and want to call their member of Congress, their senator or their congressperson, and encourage them to support these policies, now's the time to do that. Those calls do make a difference, emails, letters, what have you. And we're hopeful that over the next not too long, that we'll see a conclusion there and be able to have a positive report. So happy to answer questions if you have them.
Does the board wish to make any comments or ask any questions? Director O'Halloran.
Thank you. One question, one statement. Madam Secretary, if I were to draft a letter in support of the reconciliation bill, incorporating some of Mr. Thiel's testimony, would you be able to circulate that for any other any of the other directors who would like to sign on, to send to the Wisconsin delegation, just to share our support and help get this over the line? I know it is, watching this from Milwaukee has been difficult trying to follow the antics, but anything we can do to support it, I would like to make sure we're doing our best. So Madam Secretary, would you be able to assist with that?
Madam Secretary, would you please answer?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Yes, I can work with Mr. Thiel to make sure that letter gets in the appropriate hands.
Thank you. And then I just was hoping to make one statement. It's related to legislative affairs, but it's not necessarily on the agenda. I just wanted to draw attention to the fact that Alderman Ashanti Hamilton put out a statement encouraging public input on the Milwaukee County redistricting process. He is the chair of the Common Council's Judiciary and Legislation Committee, and it sounds like they need some public input, and the more public input that they receive at the county level and for the city would be helpful for us as well. And so if you're listening and you haven't been paying attention and you have the bandwidth, I would just encourage everyone to try to plug in. The specific call in the statement was over the next 1 or 2 weeks. So just wanted to boost the signal on that message.
Thank you very much, Director O'Halloran.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Just a little bit more information about that process. The city is actually putting out an alert for participation, given that maps were submitted for approval to Milwaukee County and all of the maps were rejected, which puts a delay in the city getting the information that it needs to move forward, and then MPS moving forward along with the city. So there's an anticipation of maybe a week or two delay. However, the greater the participation, as Director O'Halloran talked about, the quicker the action can be on getting those maps solidified and moved on to the city.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions on these matters? Seeing none, Madam Secretary, are there any reports or communications from the Office of Accountability and Efficiency?
Yes, Mr. President, we do have Mr. Chason here with us to give the report from the Office of Accountability and Efficiency for this month.
Mr. Chason.
Thank you, Chair Peterson, Matt Chason, Office of Accountability and Efficiency. That report is before you. Happy to answer any questions you might have. I do want to take a quick moment to recognize the accomplishments and the contributions of the OAE's manager of contract compliance services, Ms. Regina Flores, who will be leaving the district for another professional opportunity. And while it pays me to say it, it probably is too good an opportunity for her to pass out. It was under Ms. Flores' stewardship that the district's historically underutilized business program, the Communities in Need initiative, and the student employment and engagement achieved the highest levels of participation and outcomes since the inception of the programs in the district. It is an outstanding achievement. I know you will all join me in wishing her the very best and thanking her for these achievements in the service of our community. And with that, I thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Nancy Flores, it definitely has been a very central person in your operation and for the school district as a whole and moving us ahead in those areas. She will be missed.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Point of personal privilege. I have had a chance to work with Ms. Regina Flores since she began here in the district, and the person who had the position before her had been with the district since 1976. So Regina was instrumental in bringing all of the work into the next century. And so, making sure that students were trained for job readiness and connecting them to employment, ensuring that contractors who had an obligation to work with our students actually fulfill that contract. And if they could not, that they would partner with somebody locally to get that done. So the level of student experiences that Regina was able to give our students is unmatched. Thank you, Regina.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, Regina Flores. Okay. Madam Secretary, what's our next item of business?
The next item of business would be the reports of the independent hearing officers of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors, our student expulsions.
The chair will entertain a motion to accept, modify, or reject the report of the independent hearing officers of the dates and times listed in our agenda. Anybody wish to make that motion? Director Carr. And is there a second? Director Leonard. Okay, there is a motion on the floor. You're welcome to ask questions and make comments, or administration, do you wish to make any comment?
President Peterson and members of the board, we're requesting your acceptance of the report of the independent hearing panels that are before you. Mr. Matthew Boswell is here with me this evening, and between the two of us, we can answer any questions that you may have in regards to this item. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Director Kokogandhi.
I did say this at our special meeting that we had about this, but I just would like to reiterate that I do not think we should expel students for this particular cause. It is the continuation of the school to prison pipeline. And as a member of a society that we know that this continues to happen, I think we really need to revise our student policy handbook, and it just saddens me to think that we're disrupting a child's education because of a mistake like this. And so that I just needed to make that statement. Thank you.
Administration, do you wish to make any comment?
President Peterson, members of the board, Matthew Boswell, Senior Director of Department of Student Services. Yes, we definitely welcome that conversation, as we have had this conversation many times, and we are open to all suggestions in terms of changing our student code of conduct. As stated previously, we are in the process of forming a committee to look at student code of conduct. Everyone would be invited to participate, and we look forward to the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Director Carr.
Question, I guess my question is, what are the tiered interventions that are put into place before it leads to suspension and then expulsion?
Administration.
President Peterson and members of the board, and I will just kind of talk about any given situation, a hypothetical situation such as fighting or whatever the situation that amples up. We do everything that we possibly can. Number one, looking at counseling and support around that, making sure that, like in high schools, we have other groups like VFZ, Running Rebels, groups to help to work through that. We also have opportunities for young people to be able to work with supportive services such as the school counselor, social worker, psychologist. There's a number of things that are done that particular way before we get to this level. And usually when it comes to expulsion, it's a lot of times it's a random act or something of that nature that that get us to this point. And so therefore we also look at when we talk about placement, we're looking at prior activities and things that have happened, discipline records and those kinds of things, as well as what peers or teachers say about the child, because we also reference the staff in this as well as other individuals that were involved. So it's a deep, detailed process with a tiered approach. And our ultimate goal is to do everything that we can not to suspend children, and also everything that we can to expel children. And the only thing that we, even if it gets to an expulsion, it's with services. We're providing services, and when they get to that stage, also there are other supports that can be provided as well. And we try to make placements where they can get that additional support that's needed.
Thank you. Director Simpson.
Thank you, President Peterson. I was wondering if we had a timeline for that revision process of the student handbook. And I'm sorry if I missed this along the way.
No worries. Administration.
Yeah. President Peterson, members of the board, Matthew Boswell, Senior Director, Department of Student Services. Yes, we do. This will be a year-long process. Anytime you want to look at the student code of conduct, you want to make sure that one, our current rights and responsibility handbook that has been sent out to parents, have been sent out to schools, have been sent out to the community is in place for this school year. I would recommend not changing it in mid-year. That can happen if necessary, but in terms of looking at the student code of conduct, we'll look at all the levels and get everything aligned. And the process is very tedious, is very long. Like I said before, it will involve Milwaukee Police Department, previously judges, community members, members of Central Service, United Way, Milwaukee Secedes. Multiple organizations are involved in this process. It is a very long and tedious process. So at the current time, it's getting the committee together to start meeting. Then after that, you will meet monthly, and you will bring a final product to the board or whatever committee is assigned to for approval. And that usually happens around April, May, as you start preparing the student code of conduct to change. It has to ultimately be approved by the city attorney because there's a lot of issues related to state statutes. There's a lot of issues related to criminal ordinances that have to be worked out. So it's just it's a nice long process that usually takes about a good 8 to 9 months.
Chair Peterson and members of the board, one of the things that we are going to look at right away is this whole thing around what results into a suspension. You know, the referrals that a suspendable offense. You know, we have a situation in district from kindergarten up to 5th grade, you know, trying to not suspend students and things of that nature. And so we're going to look at those infractions and see what can we do around infractions, because if you take things away for suspension, you can't suspend a child for it. And so looking at the rights and responsibility handbook around that particular piece, such as chronic disruption or whatever the situation may be, looking at some of those infractions that we have. And that's right away, because that is something that we're looking at when we talk about alternatives to suspensions, because if we don't have that listed as an alternative to be suspended, and then we hope that we push that will push students and staff more in students into a more of a counseling mode to make sure and trying to build those safety nets around them in school.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
I just want just one more quick thing. So I thank you, and I taking time to make sure it's done thoughtfully and well, and involving as many voices as we can in that process would be is really important, so that it's something that we can really you were just making sure it's just very fairly done and kind of looks at things through a new lens. The other part of it, and this isn't really a question, but just that understanding of the changes that we're making to this document kind of would go hand in hand with what supports we're giving our schools and our teachers to provide those alternatives. So I just, as we're working through this, that those two pieces are being looked at as in tandem. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other comments, Madam Secretary, could you repeat the motion and take the roll?
On Director Carr's motion to approve the reports of the independent hearing officer, seconded by Director Linder. Director Carr. Director Carr.
Aye.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Nay.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Seamson.
Aye.
Vice President Taylor.
No.
President Peterson.
Aye.
That's 7 ayes, 2 noes. The motion passes.
Thank you. We'll now have the reports of the standing committees. Since the public hearing was given at the committee meetings, the board, as is customary, will not be giving public hearing on these reports this evening. Madam Secretary, what is the first report?
The first report is that of the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel. Item number 2, action on recommended administrative appointments, promotions, reassignments and reclassifications, salary increases and decreases, and limited term employment contracts exceeding 60 days has been set aside as it was forwarded to the board without recommendation.
Do any board members wish any other items to be set aside from this committee? Madam Secretary, what is the next report?
The next report is that of the Committee on Parent and Community Engagement. No items of this report have been set aside for separate consideration.
Do any board members wish any items to be set aside from this committee? Madam Secretary, what's the next report?
The The next report is that of the Committee on Strategic Planning and Budget. No items of this report have been set aside for separate consideration.
Do any board members wish any items to be set aside? Madam Secretary, what is the next report?
The next report is that of the Committee on Student Achievement and School Innovation. No items of this report have been set aside for separate consideration.
Do any board members wish any items from this committee to be set aside? Seeing none, I am now asking for a motion and action on a motion for the balance of the reports of the standing committees. Director O'Halloran,
So moved.
is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Director Taylor, I heard you. You seconded. Very good. Will the secretary please call the roll?
On Director O'Halloran's motion to approve the balance of the reports of the standing committees, seconded by Vice President Taylor. Director Carr.
Aye.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Vice President Taylor.
Aye.
And President Peterson.
Aye.
That's 9 ayes. The motion passes.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, what's the next item?
The first item that has been set aside from the standing committees would be from the Committee on Accountability, Finance, and Personnel, an action item on recommended administrative appointments, promotions, reassignments, and reclassifications, salary increases and decreases, and limited term employment contracts exceeding 60 days. The administration recommends to 1, authorize the promotions, reassignments, decreases and increases in salary, and appointments to the classifications indicated in the item. And 2, approve the limited term employment contracts exceeding 60 days pursuant to Administrative Policy 6.23, Parent 4, Parent B, to be effective as indicated in the attachment. This item was forwarded from the committee to the board without recommendation.
Dr. Posley, would you give us your comments, please?
President Peterson and members of the board, we're requesting your approval for the administrative appointments, LT contracts that are before you, and we're happy to respond to any questions that you may have in regards to this item.
Does the board wish to make any comments?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I believe this item was set aside by Director Carr.
Dr. Carr, do you wish to make any comments?
So one of the reasons why I asked for this to be referred to the full board without recommendation is because I really wanted time to read through the job descriptions and really get a broader, greater understanding of what we're posting, what's being fulfilled, the role or the duties, the positions, that are being fulfilled, and really do an analysis of what positions are central office based and what positions are school based. And so I just wanted to be clear on that. That was my ultimate goal. I'll hold my comments for next time. Yes.
Okay, any other comments, or would there be a motion by someone? Director Carr? Director Carr, do you want to speak or do you want to make the motion?
Motion.
Okay, so you're making a motion to approve the recommendations.
Actually, one thing, I'm sorry. I did have one thing that I think may need to be revised as I was going through the appointments. There is one individual that's listed as a 5 when I think that individual should be a 2. The last name is, I don't want to butcher it. It's Cool. Who do I speak with about that? Or is that now?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
members of the committee, individuals are not required to are not asked for proof when identifying, and some people may, depending on their nationality, change their identification
Okay.
relative to one being, being a 2, a 5, or whatever the other classifications are. But we can work with the administration to ensure that the record reflects the correct notification as submitted to HR.
Thank you. Okay, so Director Carr made a motion to approve the recommendation. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Director Herndon. Any further conversation? Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
On Director Carr's motion to approve item number 2 from the reports of the Accountability, Finance, and Personnel, seconded by Director Herndon, on action on the recommended administrative appointments, promotions, reassignments, and reclassifications, salary increases and decreases in limited term employment contracts exceeding 60 days. Approval as recommended by the administration. Director Carr.
Aye.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Vice President Taylor.
Aye.
And President Peterson.
Aye.
That's 9 ayes. The motion passes.
Director O'Halloran, do you want to say anything?
I was gonna see if you're gonna call me. Yes, I just, to all of our new hires, promotions, and reclassifications and reassignments, thank you so much for bringing your talents to serve the students and employees of Milwaukee Public Schools. And in the words of Director Phillips, go forth and do great things.
Thank you very much, Director O'Halloran. Madam Secretary, are there any items of regular business?
Yes, Mr. President, we do have 2 items of regular business. Item 1 is the reports of the board's delegates.
Okay, and could we ask the delegates for their information? Would you mind doing that, Madam Secretary?
Yes, item 2 is the monthly report of the president of the Milwaukee Board of School Directors. We were notified that the delegate reports would be presented beginning in October, when meetings start back at the school level, for our delegate to the Head Start Policy Council and the DAC. We also did not receive a report from CISA 1. We're anticipating all 3 reports next month.
Okay, and any other items?
You have Director Herndon.
Excuse me, Director Herndon.
I represent to CISA 1. However, as Dr. Mann already knows, it always conflicts with very important meetings of the board, which I have to attend, and that takes priority. So I do not have a report and will not have a report because last week I was chair of AFP, of course, and that was the same night as the meeting. That's pretty much normal.
Mr. Chair and members of the board and Director Herndon, we did get a chance to speak with CISA 1, and they will be forwarding the notes for you to provide to the board relative to your representation on the CISA 1.
And I will be presenting my president's report next month for both months.
So noted, and that would be item number 2, the monthly report of the president of the board.
Okay. Madam Secretary, are there any items of unfinished business?
We have no unfinished business.
Madam Secretary, are there any items of new business for referral to committee?
We have no items of new business.
Madam Secretary, are there any communications referral to the committee?
This month, we have no communications.
Madam Secretary, are there any resolutions for referral to committee?
Mr. President, while we do not have any resolutions for referral to committee, we do have one resolution before you tonight that we're asking for the board to take immediate action, and that is a resolution introduction of an action on resolution 2122R-14 by Directors Garcia and Gokul Gandhi on an Asian American and Pacific Islander curriculum. This resolution is being introduced in accordance with the procedures put forth by the Wisconsin Association of School Boards, WASB. The requirement of WASB is that before any resolution may be submitted for consideration for the delegate assembly in 2022, that it must first be approved by the local school boards that WASB represents. The recommendation is that the board, 1, give immediate consideration to the resolution, and 2, determine what action it wishes to take on this resolution.
Thank you. At this time, I'll accept the motion to set aside Board Rule 1.10 in order to give immediate consideration to this resolution. Do I have a motion on that? Director Garcia, and second?
I'll second it.
Okay, Director Taylor. Okay. Thank you for all the hands that went up. Madam Secretary, please call the roll on this motion to take immediate consideration of this resolution.
On Director Garcia's motion to waive Board Rule 1.10 in order to give immediate consideration of the resolution, seconded by Vice President Taylor. Director Carr.
Aye.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Vice President Taylor.
Aye.
And President Peterson.
Aye.
That's 9 ayes. The motion passes.
Right. This resolution is sponsored by Directors Garcia and Gokul Gandhi. Would either of you care to comment? Director Gokul Gandhi and then Director Garcia.
Thank you, President Peterson. As you know, the resolution outlines some of the reasoning and rationale behind this, but obviously this is a matter that's personal to me, being a South Asian woman and the first South Asian woman that was elected to the Milwaukee Public School Board. But I just wanted to point out something that I thought was really important for the listening audience. You know, between the 2010 and 2020 census periods, the population of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in Wisconsin grew 36%, right, which is consistent with the nationwide trend of 35.5% growth, which is actually faster than the entire state's growth of 3.6%. And so as we think about being a district of choice for all people of all nationalities and respecting and showing up for our students, this resolution is more than just us participating in WASB, right? It's really making sure that we are providing a welcoming curriculum and an environment for our young API students and families. And so I, hope that you all vote to codify this, but I'm really excited to put this forward and to then also make this a living and breathing document with many of the organizing groups in our community that have been working towards having representation of this nature matter. So thank you.
Thank you. Director Garcia.
Yes, and I echo everything Director Gokul Gandhi said. And I just wanted to take the time to also, acknowledge the community folks that approached us in terms of, constituents that have brought this forth as a pressing issue. Obviously, as we're working towards being the most inclusive space that we can for as many people as possible, I'm just really happy to work in collaboration with, this group of folks and really put this forth for consideration for the WASB at the state level. So I just want to make quick shout out. So, through the leadership of Dr. Adrienne Chan, who represents the Lau Community Center of Wisconsin. There's also a couple folks that represent the Asian American Pacific Islander Coalition of Wisconsin, which includes Lorna Young, representing the Organization of Chinese Americans, Ron Kuramoto, who represents the Japanese American Citizen League, Ms. Paula Phillips, that was a former MPS Board of Director and also part of the AAPI Coalition of Wisconsin, Mr. Marion Webster Denning, who represents Oneida Menominee in the Indian Community School, as well as Dr. Tony Baez, which was a former MPS School Board of Directors. So I think that this is one example of resolutions that really cross cultural lines and really looking for ways that we can carve out spaces where underrepresented histories and stories are elevated into a place that most closely mimics, the current population that we serve, as demonstrated by the demographic information that Director Gokungandi shared. So thank you everyone for helping us get this to the moment that we are now. And I do ask colleagues to be in support of this so that we can take that up, at the state level through WASB.
Thank you very much. Do other board members wish to comment? Dr. Taylor, could you take the gavel? I just want to make a short comment.
The gavel has been passed. Director Peterson.
So noted.
Yes. I want to thank Director Gokul-Gandhi and Director Garcia for working with so many important community members to make this possible. And just to emphasize that given certain things that are happening around the state where certain school board members are being challenged because they talk about critical race theory or because they think their kids should be wearing masks, it's really important work that you're doing and bringing us to WASB and to really raise this issue and not assume that it will be easy passing or sincerely passed at WASB. I mean, I hope it will be, but the work that you're doing is very important. So thank you. I'll take the gavel back, Vice President Taylor.
So noted.
Thank you. Do any other board members wish to comment? Okay. Does administration have any comments?
President Peterson and members of the board, just want to say thanks to the sponsors of this resolution. We look forward to being in support and doing everything that we possibly can as an administration to ensure this curriculum and make sure that we hear from all of the voices in our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, please call the roll.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, we do not have a motion on this resolution.
Oh, well, let's get that. I see Director Carr has her hand up. She can make the motion. And a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Director Simpson. Thank you. Now, let's try to do the roll now.
On Director Carr's motion, seconded by Director Simpson, to move approval of Resolution 2122R-14 by Directors Garcia and Gokul-Gandhi. Director Carr.
Aye.
Director Garcia.
Aye.
Director Gokul-Gandhi.
Aye.
Director Herndon.
Aye.
Director Leonard.
Aye.
Director O'Halloran.
Oh, aye.
Director Simpson.
Aye.
Vice President Taylor.
Aye.
And I know, do you have a question, Vice President Taylor?
No, I was just going to second it. I can get
Okay. Okay, thanks. And President Peterson.
Aye.
I just wanted to be sure we could answer all questions before we ended the item. That's 9 ayes. The motion passes.
Madam Secretary, are there any other resolutions for introduction?
Mr. Chair, we have no other resolutions for introduction.
Madam Secretary, next item, please.
Mr. Chair, that was the last item on tonight's agenda.
Well, before we adjourn, I would like to mention that our board clerk, Dr. Mann, celebrated her 25th year with MPS this month. Congratulations to Dr. Mann, and thank you for all your work and your dedicated years of service.
Thank you so much.
Yay.
Thanks for
Congrats.
Thank you for your
Thank
service.
Thank you.
There being no further business before the board, this meeting is adjourned.
Good night, all.
Good night, everybody.
Have
Good
a good
night.
night.
Good night.